Barry Keith Grant writes in Dread of Difference, the horror film deals with moral chaos, the disruption of natural order, and the threat of the harmony of hearth and home. This essay will emphasize the positioning of working women in neoliberal economies by looking at Halloween, Scream, Silence of the Lambs, and The Shining, random choices of popular horror movies to highlight that these gender positionings are evident in our society. John Carpenter's Halloween is a 1978 slasher movie. Although the film attempts to portray a strong female protagonist, in many ways it takes away from the idea of female empowerment instead of adding to it. When Laurie is in school, she exudes intelligence that is only to be disrupted by the sighting of Michael. According to Maya Zhou, within her unisex name, boyish-looking button-downs and collared shirts, and her sexual reluctance, Laurie has all the hallmarks of the incipient masculinity. What draws her into the feminine realm is her part-time job as a babysitter. Kept within the domestic spacing, she takes on a maternal role of protecting the child she cares for towards the end of the film.
Nobody believes me. I believe you, Tommy.
Laurie is depicted as the most powerless when she steps foot outside the house. This idea of being trapped within her home can be seen through POV shots. Laurie looks out her bedroom window, only to find an apparition of Michael standing near the washing line in her garden. Ironically, the only thing separating her from her pursuer is linked to housework and chores. It is almost as if she is symbolically shackled to the home. Michael is framed as entering the safe space of his female victims, their homes, the laundry rooms. In addition, even Laurie's defense strategies become linked to the stereotypical placing of women within the home. In the final chase scene, Laurie can be seen using household items like knitting needles as weapons. Betty Friedan states, "How can a woman see the whole truth within the bounds of her own life, or in Laurie's case, within the bounds of the domestic space she is framed in?" Uptown territories have been the settings for many horror movies, but also the grounds for grassroots feminist campaigning and resistance. But there were investigations on suburban developments and lifestyles by Wallach and Sharp and Arlie Hochschild were focused on gender relations and how they were maintained, the baby boomer generation's tenacity of female subordination, social homogeneity and masculine authority, never to deviate from women's roles as carers or domestic beings. The emergence of third-wave feminism during the late 70s and throughout the 80s saw a generation of educated professional women paving the way to become industrious leaders, aiming for opportunities and legislation for the rights of women. Feminism for the 99% argues that feminism must be anti-capitalist, that the love affair with individual advancement equally permeates the world of the social celebrity, which confuses feminism with the ascent of individual women. In Scream, news media descend upon Woodborough due to local police investigations of a series of murders that have happened around the impending first anniversary of Maureen Prescott's murder. The young victims are school friends of Prescott's daughter Sydney, who has survived an attack by the killer and has escaped with her life. Though Sydney bears similarities to Laurie in Halloween, it is Gail Weathers that is introduced to viewers, strong-willed, determined, ambitious TV journalist writer.
I should be in New York covering the Sharon Stone stalker,
Famed for her
who
coverage
knew?
of Maureen Prescott's murder, and is writing a novel theorizing that the man convicted for the crime is falsely accused.
So, how's the book? Well, it'll be out later this year. Oh, I'll look for it. I'll send you a copy.
relying on her cultural appeal to gain information or leads, regardless of the sensitive nature of the story. She prioritizes the story in following Sydney to a house party, expecting the killer to strike.
Here, let me just get my coat.
Though the general attitude of the male teens at the party are the attitudes of Davis, Ransby, and Arruza, and as teenage fraternity athletic subcultures of young men channeling institutionalized misogyny. Highlights male, suburban, middle-class high school culture, scene where Sydney hangs with her friends and questions the reasons for the murders. Male characters too hypothesizes to the gender of the murderer.
It's because there's no way a girl could have killed him.
That is so sexist. The killer could easily be female.
Zhou's statement we can regard as a metaphor in perpetuating the patriarchal capitalism and the dominance of chauvinistic attitudes. But these attitudes are intensified, as capitalist societies are by definition class societies. Capitalist societies are also by definition wellsprings of gender oppression. Sexism is hardwired into the very structure. Women's social classes determined their labor, while the gender ideology was used to legitimize and stabilize an equal distribution of resources, denying female agency in the workplace. In the opening scene, where Starling is in training on a circuit, she must report to her superior, Jack Crawford. She passes her male trainees. They automatically glance in her direction. The camera then pans right, following her to the elevator. As an audience, we notice her small frame to her colleagues, trying to ignore the gaze of her male counterparts. As the door of the elevator shuts, Starling visually is shut in a male-dominated arena. A concept coined by film critic Laura Mulvey. The notion of the male gaze is ingrained in every frame, presenting women as objects for observation by heterosexual males, dehumanizing them within the workplace and society. In accepting instructions from Crawford on how to deal with Lecter, he continuously refers to her sexual appeal, rather than her qualifications of being appointed for the case.
Will you be in Baltimore overnight? Because this can be quite a fun town if you have the right guide.
I'm sure this is a great town, Dr. Chilton, but my instructions are to talk to Dr. Lecter and report back this afternoon.
I see. Let's make this quick then.
The use of dolly-out technique creates a sense of inferiority for Starling, as she is always behind her superior, trying to catch up.
And oh, are you ever his taste?
In the framing of Starling, we witness the depiction of power between characters. They are at first shown as equals, as they stare directly into the lenses, but later, panning down on Starling and up on Lecter, as he refers to her poor background and upbringing, we are reminded of patriarchal power and gender inequality, even from a prison cell. This inevitability of female struggle and oppression Starling disregards. In the closing ceremony scene, Crawford congratulates her success, which can be observed as how threatened he is by her intelligence and agency. In the opening scenes of Kubrick's The Shining, aspiring writer Jack Torrance is interviewed for the position as an off-season caretaker for the remote Overlook Hotel. Clearly, Jack is the patriarchal head of his family, the breadwinner, and accepts the position without consulting his wife Wendy. Wendy Torrance performs a passive role, as being subservient in much of the mise-en-scène, locating Wendy within the domestic role of mother and nurturer. However, Wendy becomes caretaker of the hotel, as the audience witness her toils at Jack's maintenance responsibilities while he takes time on his writing. Jack's demise is shown through Wendy's POV. We witness his descent into madness as Wendy remains responsible and rational, with a skeptical fear of Jack. These acts of frustration can be taken as responses to the lack of control and dominance in the public arena. Jack's gaslighting of Wendy
Slightest
supports
idea
Clover's
what a
perspective
moral and ethical
of how
principle is, do you?
power cast women as
Has it
passive
ever occurred
victims
to you what would
and
happen
men
to my future
as their
if I were to
sadistic,
fail to live up to my
promiscuous
responsibilities? Has it ever occurred to you?
that
Has
born
it?
to be women experience some form of gender violence in the
I
course
just
of their
want to go back
lifetimes.
to my room.
Power dynamics is what enables this system of hierarchical power that fuses
I'm
gender,
very
race,
confused.
and class. What results from it
I just
is that
need
system's
a chance to
reinforcement
think
and
things over.
normalization.
You've had your whole fucking life.
The butler Spectre demands Jack correct his wife and child, as he did with his family when he was in the carnation of Charles Grady, caretaker mentioned before. But in Grady, we witness the ghosts of patriarchal ideals persist for control, trying to maintain the cycle of transgression through reincarnation, reminding Jack that he too is reincarnated to impose the same control and violence. History has proven that the reinforcement and normalization of this cycle is but the refusing to sacrifice the well-being of the many in order to protect the freedom of the few. That we are not free of our oppressive past if we perpetuate the destructiveness of patriarchy.